the M4 iPad Pro. I want to talk about the M4 iPad Pro again because it's somehow gotten better with time. It honestly wasn't that long ago that I was talking about the iPad Mini 7 being my favorite iPad of all time, mainly because of its size alone. And now for the first time in quite some time, I'm feeling a little bit conflicted on what my favorite iPad is, mainly because of iPad OS 26. Now, it's not crazy to think that this iPad isn't already the best thing, because this actually is the best iPad you can buy right now, the M4 iPad Pro. But iPad OS 26, especially with its more recent updates to the way Windows are managed and all that fun stuff, has made this a lot more usable in the sense of, I guess, if somebody were to try to use this as their day-to-day computer. Now, by no means is the M4 iPad trying to become my main computer, because A, I don't really want it to be in the first place, and I already have an M4 MacBook Air alongside Mac Studio down here where I create all my videos in my basement primarily, so I don't really need an M4 iPad Pro to particularly replace any machine I'm already using. That said, it's still a lot more usable than it was previously. My glasses make me look like an anime protagonist. I'm gonna go ahead and take those off. Now with iPad OS 26, there's obviously gonna be a lot of other features like liquid glass, if you care about that. The music app auto mixing, if that's something you care about as well. But for a lot of people, it's gonna come down to the new window management. I've already talked about the M4 iPad in the past and how it really is an incredible tool when it comes down to any sort of creativity or productivity. Now for myself as a part-time content creator, I use my iPad, whether that is my iPad Mini 7 or my M4 iPad Pro, to pretty much run my entire life. Now, as much as I can organize everything in my big ass head, I lean heavily onto apps like Notes, my calendar. I use Notion, I use Apple Notes. The iPad in general, whether it's the Mini, the Base, the Pro, they're all going to do an incredible job at organizing your life. And any sort of added usability to any of these systems is a huge plus. Now, yes, even my favorite iPad of all time, the iPad Mini, does have the new window management, at least on the iPad Mini 7. I'm not too sure about the other ones. But the thing is, they don't make an 11-inch MacBook, as much as I would personally love that, since I do love my small tech across the board, and the M4 iPad Pro is in a better space than it ever was before. Now, I do have to add as well, I think we're going to be expecting a new iPad this fall. I think Apple typically, does 18-month release cycles or whatever, and I think this came out in May of 2020, and I think this came out in 2024. Maybe late 2023. Somebody let me know in the comments. I can't remember when this thing came out, but I think we're due for a new one. That said, I love this iPad, and I sort of want to talk about the way I use it on the day-to-day and sort of a super long-term review of it. Now, of course, I don't really do tech specs and all that. I don't care about benchmarks and all that. There's a lot of other smarter people that can sort of cover that better than I can ever imagine to anyways. So today I'm going to sort of just take you through how I use my iPad, what I love about it, and how I lean into some of the newer features. Now, just so you know where I'm coming from, again, I'm a part-time content creator. I love creating short-form and long-form content here on YouTube. I am an accountant during my day job, and I'm a video game and recently new anime nerd. I got into anime over the last year and a half, and I'm really enjoying it. So that's how I primarily use my iPad across all of that. And again, it's sort of one of the best ways I found to organize the chaos that's my life. Okay, so if you've seen any of my other videos, I've talked about the iPad Mini a lot. And again, this was my favorite iPad, mainly because of the size alone was enough for me to sort of make this my primary iPad. Now, that hasn't particularly shifted all too much. Like I mentioned, this does also get the window management on it, similar to my M4 iPad Pro. But having that added in general to an iPad, I guess in my 11-inch size, has made this a little bit more appealing to me on the day-to-day. Now, I mentioned what I typically do on the day-to-day between accounting and creation and stuff, but how I actually use this is a little bit more in depth. Of course, naturally, I'm going to use it as a companion device, just as anybody would, such as, the FaceTime, iMessage, web browsing, just the basics that any iPad can do, really. But some of the more nuanced stuff that I love to do on iPads in general, particularly the M4 iPad, it's going to be multitasking. I am an absolute degenerate when it comes down to note-taking. I've talked about this loads and loads in the past. I'm one of those guys that journals by pen and paper daily. I love using the new journal app on iPad, since that was what actually got me into journaling in the first place when it was an iOS thing only. And I'll sort of talk about my accessories that go along with that. But yeah, my iPad, huge for any sort of note-taking, particularly having multiple windows up and note-taking at the same time, especially when I am working during the daytime for my 9 to 5. Now, as a lot of people have probably heard in the past, people who have an iPad typically have their life together. While that's definitely not always the case for myself, I can say using the basic Apple Calendar app is probably one of the best things that I've found myself using in terms of trying to at least attempt to be more organized. I love putting in or at least allotting a little block in my calendar for everything that I do, not to live more rigidly per se, but just again to be a little bit more organized. So that means things like the gym, I'm going to put in my calendar. Of course, if there's sort of any sort of family events, if I'm meeting up with some friends, if I'm allotting some time for focus periods for, making a YouTube video, or even just relaxing, I sometimes put it in my calendar so I can set some boundaries for myself on the regular. It goes in my Apple Calendar so that I know that I'm doing that specific thing. Right now, I'm really huge into my Nintendo Switch 2, and I've had to start blocking out periods so I can actually finally beat Cyberpunk. I have Cyberpunk on my PlayStation for years and I still haven't beaten it. So maybe having it portably on the Nintendo Switch helps me do that. So I even have that in my calendar, as silly as it sounds. Now, apart from that, of course, a lot of people lean into the iPad for document management and signing contracts and reading agreements and stuff. And all that is going to be a lot better on something like the M4 iPad Pro, mainly because I really enjoy the new window management on here, because it does allow me to multitask a little bit better between something such as, my Files application and the new Preview app, which is again the Preview app that you would sort of find on Mac. It's available somewhat in a more streamlined version on the iPad now, which is awesome. So I might have, Safari up on one side, music up on the other, and then I can still pop in a third or fourth window without particularly switching the way I have things organized. And that's something that I absolutely love about iPadOS 26 and the new window management. On iPadOS 18, or whatever it was before iPadOS 26 beta, you'd have to just have two windows up and you'd multitask, and you could change the size of those windows, but that didn't give you the same, accessibility to all the other apps and windows that you might typically use. So that's why I love that new feature, and I sort of want to double down on that. Now, as somebody who is an accountant during the daytime as well, naturally that sort of bleeds into my real life, and I use iPads to track, my day-to-day finances and expenses. I actually just use Apple Numbers because I find it a little bit more cleaner. Apple Numbers does a great job, and it keeps things clean, especially when I'm tracking any sort of cash flows and all that for my dailies and the ins and outs, and what I'm actually spending my money on. Now, that isn't to say it's not going to work on something like the iPad Mini 7, but again, this is going to be a lot smaller. This is my fun iPad, if that makes any sense. Especially if I'm using, a flip phone or something. I love having my iPad mini. When I'm really getting into the organization and the productivity, the M4 iPad Pro, for myself at least, is going to be the go-to. Now, from a creation standpoint, I have talked about this across many of the iPads in the past, whether that is the Mini or the Pro. I will say the Pro is going to be the way to go if you're doing any sort of larger project editing, especially if you're using something like Final Cut. I've edited full projects on Final Cut Pro using my iPad. I talked about this when this iPad first came out. When my son was born, I had him strapped to my chest, and I think for an entire month I edited all my YouTube videos with a baby on my chest while holding this thing in my hand. And that sort of goes even further now with the updates that they've had on Final Cut Pro. It's become a little bit better in terms of the functionality. Now, naturally as well, there are going to be the times where I'm not doing any sort of productivity, and I lean into my iPad for pretty much any sort of medium or gaming. For those times that I do want to allot a specific time, set some boundaries for when I want to chill out and relax. Sometimes there's nothing that quite beat just watching a show in bed or something. Solo leveling, you guys gave me that recommendation a couple months back. I also have a huge list of movies that I'm slowly trying to make my way through, and it's been an absolute pleasure watching it on here whenever I want. So in my desk setup here, at least, I typically only have one monitor in my desk setup at all times. I prefer the way it looks. It's cleaner. It's not the most productive though. So I typically will always have my iPad with me here while I'm working during my day job or in the evenings, either as a secondary monitor for any sort of referencing, or I might have a show up on here at the same time, or otherwise some sort of music or YouTube. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of how I use this on the daily. It's not all I have to say about this in today's video, mainly because tomorrow I'm actually headed into the city. I'm headed into downtown Toronto for the first time in literally over a year. I'm out in the suburbs, and between the responsibility of kids, work, my online courses, and everything in between, I don't get into the city much, but I am going to be meeting up with my buddy John, and I am going to take this guy with me along. We're going to be doing some cafe hopping, grab some lunch, and just checking out the city and getting some dope footage, which I am going to do some editing on here. Headed into the city tomorrow. I'll take you guys along with me alongside the M4 iPad Pro, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
The first day I saw you seems long ago. I still remember it was so cold, and you were warming up with some green tea. You asked me, can you lend me sugar? You grabbed the chicken bowl and shook her, and you put all the sugar right on me. And what a crash, what a crash. Felt a sudden sugar rush as you sang me your apologies. When the second day we met by chance, what a sweet coincidence. The find the sugar girl right next to me. Decided it's time to introduce myself. Your name that came with an address that led me to my favorite night in years. Just 7 days. And sugar's the more.
So I've been in the city almost all day so far, and easily said I'm going to be coming down here a little bit more often, because I think living in the suburbs I've gotten a little bit used to not really doing much. As much as I love exploring my own city, I've had such a good time in downtown Toronto, and obvious to say there's an unlimited things pretty much you can do down here. The cafes. I originally came here to do some cafe hopping with my buddy, and I ended up exploring a ton of places. Where did we go? We went to this dope ass place called Pigeon, and that was the best croissant I've ever had.
That was so much chocolate.
Then we went to this other spot called DeMello. I ended up picking up some beans, and I had a flat white, which was actually flippin' delicious. Yep, that's a flat white. And I got a little bit of work done while I was there. So this whole time that we've been down here, I've been sort of using my iPad to plan out where we were going to try and go. And as much as I want to, have a good time out and about in the city today, there was some work to be done. And my buddy's really close to the CN Tower. And we're right in the downtown core today. So there's actually been a ton of stuff to do. So I've had a blast checking out all the spots down here. I also had one of the best pizzas in my top 5 of all time, and I'm actually using my iPad to go through the places we went. We went to Prince Street Pizza, which is probably one of the best slices of pizza I've ever had. It had this ricotta on top, and it's something I've never had. I've never had ricotta on pizza. That might be common, but I've never had it. It was flippin' amazing. The last spot we checked out before coming back here was this donut place called Dipped, and I got some sort of raspberry vanilla donut. That was unreal. I've burnt a ton of calories today, but anyways, I don't know if it's too loud with the sirens, so I'm gonna wait a second. Ah, that is some good coffee. Now quickly, I do want to give a huge thanks to Storyblocks for sponsoring a portion of today's video. As much as I've been able to film in this city, there are going to be some shots that I can't particularly get. Again, I don't own a drone. I don't know if you guys own a drone, but if you are looking for any sort of stock assets, Storyblocks is definitely the place to go. For today's video, you're going to see some shots from Storyblocks that is in today's video, such as the aerial shots of Toronto. Depending on the project you're working on, Storyblocks will have templates or overlays that you can use at any point in time. You are going to get unlimited downloads for music and stock footage, all for a predictable, affordable subscription price. So as a creator, whether you're part-time like myself or full-time, or if you run an entire professional business, you can get unlimited music, images, videos, sound effects, and more, of course, which will help any sort of creator or business enhance your media. One of the best things as well is you don't have to worry about any sort of copyright, since that is all included in the subscription. Storyblocks does give you unlimited downloads of diverse, high-quality media, all for one predictable subscription cost, and it's all authentic stock content actually created by real artists. So if you are trying to capture real content, real emotions, Storyblocks will have you covered. If you do want to get started with Storyblocks all under one predictable set price, be sure to check the link here on screen and down below in the video description. And thanks again to Storyblocks for sponsoring a portion of today's video. But talking about the iPad a little bit while I've been down here, one of the things I got to talk about is the Magic Keyboard. As much as the iPad is incredible, for the iPad Pro, again, particularly for myself having the 11-inch, it's almost a necessity to have the Apple Magic Keyboard, because yeah, sure, the iPad is incredible on its own. From a tablet standpoint, there's almost nothing better on the market, I can say, because again, as I mentioned yesterday, it is an absolutely incredible tablet, but once you pair it with something like the Magic Keyboard, it's on a whole different level. Now for myself, as a portability standpoint, again, the 11-inch iPad with the Magic Keyboard is just going to be so incredibly usable on the go. I think one of the more impressive things is probably going to be the trackpad, because coming from somebody who uses my iPad Air a lot, not my iPad Air, my MacBook Air a ton, the trackpad on Apple MacBooks are just plain absurd. There's nothing better I've used so far, but the trackpad from the Apple products, I even bought one for my desk setup because the trackpad's that good, and that still transfers over to the Magic Keyboard, so something I love. Now, while we're out as well, I was in a lot of different areas, and the screen on this tablet is absolutely absurd. It gets insanely bright, and again, it is a tandem OLED. So if I recall, I'm pretty sure that's 2 OLED panels smushed together, and it gets incredibly bright. Now, I've talked about the OLED display in the past. It's one of the best things when it comes down to any sort of media or content. Lately, at least for myself, I've been more of a degenerate, watching a good chunk of anime in bed and stuff, or again, while I'm working, and the display on this iPad is absurd. Now today as well, I did get a chance to do a little bit of editing on this tablet. I don't particularly use it for, again, my whole video edits, but I mostly just started using Instagram's edit application. It's actually pretty good if you haven't tried it out yet. And while there is no dedicated iPad application, again, as mentioned, with the new window management, the edits application is actually very much usable on here. So I really do dig it. If you haven't tried that, it's a good alternative to something like CapCut. And again, I do all my short form content on the Instagram edits app. And then I might still put it onto YouTube and TikTok. If I am going to be out and about more frequently, coming into the city a little bit more often, I'm probably going to start getting Final Cut Pro on my iPad again, just to actually push the power on here. I don't think anything else is going to come quite near this thing, especially for the portability and the usability as an entire package. It's kind of unreal. Now, as for the rest of my evening, I think today I'm going to round it out. I'm going to go get my first banh mi and pho with my buddy John, and then I'm probably going to head back home to the suburbs. I've had a blast out here in the city today. I've got some more iPad content to sort of jump into tomorrow on Sunday, and that's going to be my weekend with the iPad Pro. So yeah, I'm going to check out the city a little bit more, and I'll catch you guys later on or tomorrow. Okay. Look how close this guy is to like the city core. Like, that is crazy. So yesterday was absolutely absurd. I'm sunburnt, slightly exhausted, and happy that I got the hell out of the house. As somebody who's more of a homebody, heading into the city was something that I really needed just to sort of get out of my comfort zone. Recently, that's just sort of been what I've been after. Honestly, simply just doing things that I don't typically do. And the iPad M4 iPad Pro did incredibly well throughout the entire day. Not that the battery life was ever much of an issue before, but having actually taken it outside for the entire day, I left yesterday, I don't know, like 9:30 in the morning, and I drove back home. I was home around 8 something. And having used it as much as I did throughout the day, I just plugged it in for the first time now into my desk setup, and it was at 10% battery. So I used it a lot today as well before plugging it in, which is pretty awesome. So battery life, absolutely excellent. Now quickly as well, I mentioned this iPad works very well all on its own. And quickly, I do sort of want to talk about the accessories that I use with this, because I find it sort of elevates, I guess, the way I use this thing in the first place. The first thing, I already mentioned this one, Apple Magic Keyboard. It's pretty much a must-have. I won't go more in depth on that. The Apple Pencil is sort of also another must-have if you are a note-taker like myself. Love writing every single day. Note-take when I'm working my 9 to 5. I do a lot of creative work on this iPad. I use a ton of Procreate when I'm doing my videos. So you might see throughout this video, you might have seen some, handwritten texts or little accents on certain aspects in the video. And a lot of the time I do that in Procreate. I export a PNG and I toss it into Final Cut Pro. I will mention as well, a lot of the edits that you saw in this specific video was partially done on iPad. There's a good chunk of pieces of this video that you're watching that was edited on the iPad Pro. Again, it wouldn't be the primary way that I edit videos, but I definitely could if I wanted to. And I find a good way to sort of set your videos apart is just to use, I guess, something more handwritten. So the fonts, any sort of subtitles, if I've captioned anything in this video, it's all handwritten fonts that I've included. And again, I could use this Apple Pencil to write whenever I'm using any sort of Final Cut Pro or, again, Procreate. But yeah, because I do love to draw, I do love to write, and I do love all things Apple Pencil, I use Paperlike, the Paperlike screen protector. I've worked with them in the past, and even without having worked with them, I've used Paperlike for like 4 or 5 years at this point. So if you do like Apple Pencil on your iPad, definitely consider some sort of paper feeling screen protector. It doesn't have to be the Paperlike brand. They're more expensive, but I also find that is the best one. There are some other ones on Amazon and stuff. They just feel a little more gritty is the best way I can put it. And the last accessory that I use with this is probably going to be a folio of some sort. I like using the one from Moft. That one just has a lot of different angles. It has portrait, it has vertical, it has elevated, a ton of options for using any sort of folio on this. So that's probably my go-to. Now, the last couple things about this, just to touch on, is I just got to mention the speakers. I'm a bit of a music fiend. Speakers on here are absolutely excellent. I love to cook and use this iPad with music. I love to shower, listen to music on here. Or again, sometimes when I'm just working, I'll just listen to music through my iPad because sometimes it's a little bit easier to navigate than using my work laptop, for example. And it does incredibly well. Likewise, I use the mic and the camera a lot for work calls and of course, FaceTiming with my family. So I just got to mention that. You're not going to be using the camera on this iPad for any sort of creative work. Maybe you can. Apple showcases people using these as like cinema rigs. Weird. I don't think I'd ever particularly do that. But it is great for, you know, scanning documents or whatever else you might need. And I think the last thing I want to talk about with this iPad to sort of wrap up this video is the fact that you can just set this thing up in a flippin' desk setup. So, I mean, like I'm up here in my bedroom and I plugged in directly through this Type-C port or the Thunderbolt port on this MacBook. I keep calling it a MacBook because it's so capable, but iPad. I plugged in the Type-C port into this iPad like a MacBook, and I could run my entire desk setup off of an iPad, which is kind of crazy. So if you are doing things like emails, word processing, whatever it might be, this does a great job at that. So one of those other things that just sort of impresses me. But yeah, that's something to be mindful of. Seriously, this is an iPad Pro. Like I literally have a video export going right now for this project. A part of it's going to be for this project. I have Procreate open on this side. And then if I press play, like I'm listening to music, just vibing out all through one cable in my desk setup. Like this is bonkers. Absolutely incredible piece of tech. Overall, the M4 iPad Pro is an incredible, absolutely remarkable piece of tech, and I don't have much to say bad about it, honestly. So if this sort of sounds like a fanboy love letter to the M4 iPad Pro, maybe because it is, I don't know, it's just a good piece of tech, and I can't really think about anything to complain about it. I will say, if Apple does come out with a new iPad this fall, I'm like 99% sure you won't need to consider anything more than the M4 iPad Pro, which is already crazy as is. How they could even make this thing better, I can't even think about it. If anything, I'm sure it would be iterative. But yeah, that's today's video. It was a bit of a different format. I sort of had a lot of vloggy elements just because I like mixing it up a bit, and that's how creation and art goes. And something like the M4 iPad Pro sort of helps in that process and helps me, I don't know, be more creative. But yeah, I appreciate you guys watching till the end. If you did enjoy this different type of content, let me know in the comment section so I know whether or not to never do it again or to do some more of it. But yeah, anyways, thank you for hanging out. I appreciate you guys watching till the end. Till next time. Remember that song? You know what song this is?
Yeah, man. What's going on?
What is it? I know it's on your tongue.
Toy Story?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was
I learned that for Ava. I learned that for Ava.